Back then, the city schools were the power baseball teams then, and so we had a good team, and I played through school and had a little success. So then I went to Ohio State for 1 quarter, 2 quarters, and then I dropped out of school and signed with the Twins. And the rules were different. The rules were different then. You could sign with anybody you wanted. There was no draft, you know, and so the Phillies said, well, we'd like you as a first baseman or a pitcher, and we'll give you $1,000. And so, you know, it was kind of like, well, then the Minnesota scout came along, and he said, well, we'll give you $5,000, be a pitcher. So signed with them, and off I went.
In high school, were you both a pitcher and a infielder?
Oh, yeah, I was a pitcher and a first baseman.
Did you have a preference?
Well, I liked them both, but pitchers control the game, and I kind of, you know, I like that. So when I had to make a decision which way to go, I thought, well, I'm going to stick with that. That's kind of what I always wanted. So I stuck with being a pitcher. And one thing that really helped me, and it's kind of unique, is I was crippled when I was young, and I really believe that probably helped me be a major league player. And the reason is I couldn't walk on my left leg for 3 years and 3 months. I had a metal brace, and my leg was out straight, and it was all strapped around here, and I walked on crutches. And by the time I got that brace off, I was the strongest kid in the school because of walking on crutches for 3.5 years. And this is where my mom and dad were really important, because they never said, Fred, don't do that, Fred, don't do this. I ran in the yard with those crutches with all the other kids, and I could go just about as fast as most of them. And so then when I got that brace off, it was on Christmas Eve in 1953. There was no muscles in this leg because I hadn't stepped on it over 3 years, and it was a building process. But my arms were really strong, and I went out for a Little League team in March of that year, which was only 3 months later, and I could throw as hard as any kid in Little League. I just couldn't run. And but I think that really got me started off on the right foot, as being able to throw the ball really hard. So a bad thing turned into a good thing, I think.
But when they were scouting you, what were they looking at, and what were they looking for? What opened the scouts' eyes?
Well, you know what? Back in the time when I played, there weren't many scouts. There were what we called bird dog scouts. You know, you have these local guys, and then they report if they see a kid that reports really good. But mostly the way they judge pitchers was how hard can he throw. You know, if he's got a good arm, then we'll teach him the rest of it. You know, and so that's kind of what they went off of. And you know, if a kid could run fast, if he hit good, that, you know, they also judged that too. But as far as pitchers are concerned, it was you know, what kind of arms he got. And the one thing that I think, and I've worked with college kids and a bunch of other kids, but the hardest thing to scout is how big's a kid's heart. You know, and you got to really know them to know that. And that's the hardest thing to scout. You know, I've seen a lot of kids who could throw really hard or hit the ball really good, but when it came down to crunch time, you know, they weren't there. And so that's the hard thing to see. And I can honestly say that you know, I was a short reliever for a few years, and that's a pretty pressure-packed situation, and I loved it. But I got to say, most guys didn't. I know I had friends who, in Detroit, when I was sitting in the bullpen, I'd look down and I'd say, well, he throws harder than I do, and he's got a better breaking ball, and he's got this or that, but if the game's on the line tonight, I'm going to be the guy that's in there. And I loved that, you know. I threw in the bullpen, and you'd say, well, he's okay. But I went to the mound, and I threw better. And I saw a lot of guys throw in the bullpen, and you say, wow, that guy ought to be in the Hall of Fame, you know. And when he went to the mound, he lost it, you know. Yeah, yeah. So, and you know, that's not something you really learn. You can kind of have it or you don't. And fortunately, I like that. So.
But you mentioned that they teach you the rest. What are some of the pitching coaches that helped you along the way? Can you remember any of those guys?
You know what? Other players help you more than coaches. Yeah, I was real fortunate with one thing. My first year in the big leagues, Johnny Sain was our pitching coach in Detroit, and he would say things like, you know, I got beat around in spring training. You know, I'm trying to make the team. I'm a young kid. I got beat around in spring training. I come walking off the mound, my head's down, and here's Johnny Sane, Hall of Famer. He's got my jacket. He comes over and he puts it around my shoulders. He said, "We'll talk about it tomorrow." So, okay. So I started feeling a little bit better, you know. And then tomorrow, the next day comes and he comes over and he says, "You know, that slider you threw to that second batter," he said, "that was really good. That's what we got to work on to get it like that." And it was a psychological thing, you know. He really built your confidence and made you feel good about what you were doing. And I think that just the mental part of him talking to me was one of the biggest things that really helped me.
Johnny Sane's sidekick in the bullpen was a guy named Hal Naragon.
I know him well, yeah.
And Hal sat at the same chair you were at last summer.
Did he?
Yeah, so give me a Hal Naragon story.
You know, I didn't know Hal Naragon when he was a catcher, when he was a player. I only knew him as a coach in the bullpen, and he was Johnny's sidekick, and you know, Johnny guided him to tell us what to do and stuff, and so Hal was kind of the mental part in the bullpen. When Johnny would call down and say, "Hey, get Sherman loose," you know, he'd jump up, and Hal would be the guy who talked to you, would go out and stand next to you when you're warming up. So,
by the way, what happens? You see that all the time. There's the guy warming up in the bullpen, and there's the bullpen coach. What are they saying?
Usually not much. I got a great story about that. I really do. My first year in the big leagues, Denny McLain had just won 31 games, and he's on his way to winning 25 more. And he's won a bunch already, see, and so he's pitching it this night. And he goes to the bullpen. And, you know, when you see pitchers warming up in the bullpen, the pitching coach is always standing behind him like, yep, you know, I'm telling him all this stuff. Johnny's sitting on the bench next to me. And Denny's warming up down the third baseline. And I said, "Why aren't you down there with him?" He said, "He don't need me. He just won 31 games. You need me. I'll talk to you." That's the way he was, though, and you know, he's absolutely right. He says, I don't need that glory, that credit. Denny did it, so. You know, it's all kind of relative. The money today comes from the television contracts. When I played, we had Saturday game of the week, and Lolich always worked it out so he got to pitch that game if it was on television. So, but that's all they had coming in from it. Today, the money that comes in from television far exceeds the attendance in the stands. So the money's available, you know, and the players, of course, want to get their share of it, and I don't blame them. And it was just the opposite with us. I remember the first 3 or 4 years I played, excuse me, with the Tigers, the payroll for the entire team was $1 million, and they just won the World Series. And even Kaline wasn't making $100,000. And he was the first Tiger to make $100,000 because John Fetzer was the owner, and he wanted Al to be the first one. Excuse me. And, you know, we had McLean and Lolich and Freehan, a lot of guys who had some big years, and they were making 60. Norm, yeah.
One real big year.
Norman, yeah. But you know what? We probably had more fun. We weren't under near as much scrutiny. I was telling some guys this morning. I said, you know, this would be tough today because I was pretty competitive. You know, I mean, I wasn't happy when things weren't going my way, and I'd shout out stuff and things. Well, they didn't catch that on television. Today, if you do some of the things, I mean, ESPN shows it over and over and over, you know, and everybody in the country thinks you're a big jerk, you know. And, so from that standpoint, I think it was easier to play. We didn't have all that scrutiny, but, you know, it was to get some of the money would have been nice.
Your trick pitch. The trick pitch today seems to be if you can make the ball bounce twice, he'll swing at it. What was your trick pitch?
I wish I had a trick pitch. I didn't. I was pretty much a fastball pitcher. It was a sinker. You know, most left-handers have that sinking, moving fastball, and that's what I had. And when I got good control of it is when I had success. You know, and then I mixed in a little slider, and very rarely I'd throw a curveball, or even more rarely I'd throw a changeup. Short relief, you don't get an opportunity to do that much. You know, a starter gets a lot more opportunity to go to your second and third pitch. And I played 3 years for Billy Martin, and if you got beat on your second best pitch, he flipped out. I mean, he just went bananas. You don't get beat on your second best pitch. So pretty much it was, here it comes, it's me and you, and let's see who's better. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You just hope you win more than you lose.
Fred, today you hear Tommy John surgery all the time.
Yeah.
How often did you have a sore arm?
No, you know what? I never had a sore arm. My arm hurt all the time. I mean, I used to sleep at night like this. I would move my arm, I'd go to the park the next day, and Billy would say, "How do you feel?" I said, "I feel great, man." He'd say, "All right, you're in short relief tonight." I mean, you don't let somebody else take your job. I got hurt one time when I got hit. I was batting, and I don't know, there was something going on. They threw at me, and I put my hands up, and I got hit in the elbow, and that almost ended my career. I missed almost a year over that because all the tendon, when I went out to try to pitch, and then that just tore loose in my elbow. And of course, they didn't have Tommy John surgery back then. It was just a matter of working it back. And fortunately, I was lucky. I had a minor league manager. They sent me to Rocky Mount, North Carolina, and there was a manager named Al Fedoroff, and he had suggested drafting me from Minnesota. So when I went to Rocky Mount, he said, "Fred, I'm going to start you because that's where I think we can do the best for your arm, and you pitch to one batter, 1 inning, 2 innings, whatever you can pitch, and we'll try to stretch it out." And we did that, and you know, I think the first game I pitched 4 innings, and then stretched it a little more, and finally got back where I could throw the ball pretty good again. If he hadn't stuck with me, you know, and a lot of managers wouldn't have, if he hadn't stuck with me, I probably would have had to, that would have been the end of my career there. But
His minor league career was in Jamestown.
Yeah.
who, Al Fedoroff?
Yeah.
He was a great guy.
How did you get out of the Tigers? You're with the Twins
Oh, okay.
organization. At some point, you become a Tiger.
I signed with the Twins, and I had a really good year in the Florida State League. I was a starting pitcher on the All-Star team, and you know, I started more games and pitched more innings, I think, than anybody. So anyway, I beat the Lakeland Tigers 4 times. I was 4-0 against them, and Al Fedoroff was the manager. So he said to the organization, "Hey, we ought to try to get this guy from the Twins." And back then, what the rule was, if you put a kid on a roster, another team could buy him if they put him on one higher league's roster. And there was a certain dollar figure. So what happened was the Twins wanted to protect me, but they had one spot open on their roster. It was, and they had Dave Boswell, who signed for $60,000, and they had Fred Scherman, who signed for $5,000. And Calvin Griffith says, "Protect my money," you know. So they put Boswell on the big league roster, and they put me on the Atlanta Crackers roster, which was their AAA team. Well, that left me open to where a major league team could buy my contract if they put me on the big league roster. It didn't have to keep me on a big league team. They had to put me on the 40-man roster, and it cost them $8,000. So they paid $8,000 for my contract, and then I went to over to Detroit and went to Rocky Mount.
So you went to Rocky Mount, then Montgomery, and then in '68, you were at Toledo.
I was at Toledo in '68. We had a great team.
I read someplace your ERA that year was probably the lowest in the history of Toledo.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Well, there you go. You can use that when you call your wife. Yeah, you're in fact your ERA was 1.76. You were 8-2. A hot shot. Talk to me a little bit about 1968. You're Toledo. You're a few miles south of what's going on in Detroit. Mm-hmm. Before we get into the team aspect of it, also Detroit was going through some real social metamorphosis. I mean, we're talking civil rights, fires. Did that play at all in what you're observing in Toledo, with the civil rights things going on?
You know, I don't think so. Back at that time, I was a young kid, and that was kind of news, but I didn't, you know, we didn't really pay a lot of attention to that stuff. We knew that the fires had burned right up to the ballpark because, you know, that's the kind of stuff that you hear. But we were just concerned in playing ball, and that's pretty much what we did. And we had an excellent team. I think 9 pitchers off of that team went to the big leagues the next year, 8 or 9. Jim Rooker was on that team, and Dick Tracewski had a great career, and Tom Timmerman and Mike Kilkenny, and and me and Leo Marintet. I don't think Leo went to the big leagues, but we finished. If I remember right, I think we finished last in the league in team batting average and won the league. So there were a lot of close well pitched games and good defense there, and it was hard. You know, I made the Tigers team the next year, and it's hard to make a team that just won the World Series because there aren't a lot of spots open. You know. But they did have the draft, the expansion. I mean, and so that really helped. And I was fortunate. Mayo Smith was the manager, and he didn't, for whatever reason, he would not pitch me. That was my toughest time in all the big leagues. I made the team in spring training feeling really good, and went out, and I don't think I pitched for 30 days, and. Sent me back to Toledo, and I made the All-Star team, won a bunch of games in Toledo, called me back to the big leagues, and he wouldn't pitch me. And he did the same thing to John Warden the year before. Right. Warden won 4 games before anybody in the big leagues and hardly ever pitched and never got in the World Series. The only player that never got in the World Series. And Mayo just had this thing that he didn't want me on the team, but Johnny Sane wanted me on the team, and the general manager, Jim Campbell, wanted me on the team, but Mayo calls the shots. So he said, okay, put him on the team. I just won't pitch him. So that's kind of what happened. And then the next year I went to spring training, made the team, and everything was fine. It was like a whole new world, you know. And so I was in, I think my second year I was in like 48 games or something. And then Mayo got fired, and Billy came in, and things got pretty good.
In 1969, you did pitch sparingly, but you won your first game. Do you remember that first game?
I do. I came in, I tell everything as accurately as I remember it. But if I remember right, we were playing Oakland, and I think Tito Francona, who was Terry Francona's father, left-handed batter, it seems to me we were like in a 10th inning or something, and Mayo called me into the ball game to get left-hander out, and I got Francona out. And they had a pitcher, Oakland had a pitcher named George Lazarique, and he was pitching, and Jim Northrup came up. And Jim Northrup was what we called a great cripple hitter when he got ahead in the count, you know. And George Lazarique went 3-0 on Jim Northrup and laid one in there, and Northrup hit it over the roof in right field in Tiger Stadium and that was a walk-off. That was my first win. So I remember that. I don't remember a lot of them, but you know, you remember that one. That and the first time I walked into Yankee Stadium, I got to tell you, it was pretty awesome because we had to wear coats and ties everywhere we went. You know, when we were out of the hotel room, we had to wear a coat and tie. And so our bus pulls up to Yankee Stadium, and we go in, and you walk through the tunnel, and you come out onto the field, you know. And for the very first time, I walked out there, and I looked around, and I'm thinking, man, Mantle and Maris and Ruth and Gehrig, and here I am. That was that was one of the moments that kind of just sticks in your mind, you know, and that was pretty cool. So,
could tell a story or two, or a vignette, or something about like Al Kaline.
Well, you know, Al was our superstar, and great player. But he was Al was a quiet guy, and he kind of stuck to himself mostly. So you know, the Tiger at that time, I gotta say, our team was a little bit cliquish. The younger guys were here, and the older guys who'd won the World Series, they kind of stuck together, you know. And so, but Al was kind of by himself. He didn't do that, but we didn't spend a lot of time with him. You know, I ate with my buddies, and they went their way. And of course, we didn't have any money. So I was telling guys earlier, in my whole big league career, I don't think I took a taxi 3 times, because we didn't have money. We weren't going to waste it on a taxi. We walked to a place close by or something, you know. And those guys, Al and Norm, and they were making more money, so they could afford to go their way a little bit, you know. So,
give me your best Mickey Lolich story.
Mickey Lolich, great pitcher.
Willie Horton.
We had a bad fight in Cleveland one time, and Willie Horton ran the whole team off the field. He was a bad dude, if you want. He was a good guy, but the way I understand it, Willie Horton won the Detroit area heavyweight Golden Gloves championship, and he was 14 years old, and you have to be 16. So he wanted to go to the Nationals, and he didn't have a birth certificate to prove that he was 16. So they disqualified Willie, and they reinstated this guy that Willie knocked out. And that guy won the National Heavyweight Golden Gloves Championship, and Willie knocked him out. He was only 14 years old. So nobody messed with us much. We had some big guys, and Willie was a great guy, but you just didn't want to make him mad. Same with Gates Brown. You remember Gates Brown? One time a reporter asked Gates Brown what he took in high school, and he said, "Oh, hubcaps, anything I get my hands on."
What about Dick McAuliffe? He got into a couple scrapes too.
Yeah, he was a scrappy guy. Good little second baseman, real scrappy guy. Good hitter, had a little power. So good guy on the team.
Now, one of your All-American characters was Norm Cash. Give me a Cash story.
Another guy that he was older than most of us. He and Al, and I think I played 5 years on the same team with Norm, and I don't think I ever ate a meal with him. You know, it was just kind of like they go their way, and I do have one pretty good story. We were playing the Red Sox. I don't know if it was in Detroit or Boston, and Louis Tiant was pitching. And you know, Norm's lead off of first base was this far. If you get a base hit, he's going to second. If you get another hit, he'll go to third, you know. So nobody ever threw over to first base on Norm. So Louis Tiant, he had this deal like this, you know, if you remember or not, he did that, okay? So Norm gets a base hit. His lead is this far off of first base, and Louis does one of these, boom, and he fires over, and Norm went, timeout. And the umpire says, timeout. No, you can't do that, you're out. He didn't even get back to first with this far off.
That's cute. You were there when Denny was there. You were there when Denny was there, and when he wasn't pitching, he seemingly was on television or doing nightclub acts or something. Was that pretty much his reputation as a kind of a athlete, but at the same time sort of unto himself?
Yeah, you know, everybody liked him, but he did off the cuff stuff, and that's probably one of the things that made him a great pitcher. Is you know, he had the same attitude on the mound as he had away from it, you know, and he was fearless. I mean, he would throw any pitch at any time to any batter. It didn't matter, and it takes a lot of nerve to do that kind of stuff. And but he was fun to watch. He could get 2 strikes on a batter faster than anybody I've ever seen. I mean, I'd be sitting in the bullpen with my buddies, and I'd turn and I'd say, well, did you see so-and-so and so? And I'd turn around and 0-2. I said, how did he do that, you know? And he was pitching to Harmon Killebrew one time. And we thought Harmon Killebrew might have been the best clutch hitter in the American League at one time. I mean, he was tough. And then he got, let me see, he went 3-1 on Killebrew. And he winds up, you know, he had that high leg kick, and he dropped down sidearm and threw him a slider. Well, Killebrew was cranked up for a fastball. I mean, he fell to one knee, kind of corkscrewing the ground, trying to keep from swinging. Strike 2, you know. And now Denny winds up, and it counts 3-2. Denny winds up and threw a mediocre fastball right down the middle, and Killebrew couldn't pull the trigger. It just froze him. And he just dropped the bat. Oh, no. Walk back, he's out. But he did stuff like that. I mean, and if you hit a home run off him, a long home run, good for you, you know. I give you credit for it. But I learned some stuff from Denny. Just his attitude was I think he gave up the last time Mantle batted in Tiger Stadium. He laid one in there for him to hit a home run, and then he was at third base shaking his hand when he came around the bases, you know. So he was a character. He's the kind of guy that might have trouble today because of all the attention that you get and all the criticism that you get, you know. But in our era, we were able to get away with a little bit more of that kind of stuff, and he was a great pitcher.
What about Jim Northrup?
He won that game for me, my first one. I like that. he ran in a different group. Northrop and Freehan and Mickey Stanley and a few of those guys kind of ran together, and they hung out together. So I didn't spend a lot of time with him. Dick was our first base coach.
Okay.
Yep, and you know, fine, good guy to have around. Fun in the clubhouse. You know, just good. Almost, he wasn't a whole lot older than some of the players at that time. You know, so just one of those good guys to have around with you.
You mentioned Billy Martin. Give me your best Billy Martin story. He managed a few teams, and now he's with the Tigers.
I can't really give you my best Billy Martin stories. Not unless you turn that camera off. I appreciate greatly that he liked me because I was a little bit like him when it came to, I was pretty, I didn't like losing. And he came over to our team, and you know, it's like here's a new manager, and you got all these guys, and he comes in and he says, all right, we're starting from scratch. Everybody's even, nobody this, you know, and we're going to use everybody on the team, and so we're not gonna pitch one guy all the time and stuff. And I set the record that year for most appearances in the season. So, but I got to say one thing: in spring training, the very first year. We were playing the Chicago White Sox, an exhibition game in Sarasota. And what happens is, you know, you go over and the starter will pitch 3 innings, and then guys will come in, relievers will come in, pitch 1 inning. So, and Billy's getting to know us. You know, he knows our names, but he's getting to know how we perform and stuff. So anyway, the starter pitched, and somebody else came in, somebody else pitched. So then it was my turn, and I went out there and I gave up 2 home runs. You know, and so I get the last guy out, and I go in and I sit down right next to him. He said, all right, go in and take a shower. I said, let me go back out there. He said, wait a minute. You want to go back out there after what I just saw? I said, yeah, I'm better than that. Let me go back out there. He said, all right, go back out there. I went back out there, gave up another home run. And he loved it. You know, he loved it. He thought, well, at least this guy's got, if he ain't throwing very well, at least he's trying hard. So.
Moxie.
Yeah, Moxie, that's good.
When you came into relief, was there certain guys during that time period of the early 70s that you kind of hoped, you didn't mind, you hoping that the lineup would be such that you wouldn't have to face them? Were there a couple of guys that you just had a hard time getting out?
There was a guy with the Chicago White Sox named Walt No Nick Williams. I couldn't get that guy out. I threw everything. High, low, in, out, up, down, fastball, curveball, it didn't matter. He hit it. And you know, the more he hits it, the more confidence he gets. So he wore me out. But when I was throwing good, I didn't care who came up. You have to have that attitude, you know. I didn't care who came up. Come on up here. I'm better than you are. You know, you're making more money than me, and that ticks me off, you know. So I'm going to get you out. And that's the attitude you have to have, you know. I never ask other players for autographs because I felt like if I ask somebody for an autograph, that's kind of saying that he's better than me. I'm looking up to him, you know. So I wouldn't do that. It was just a mental thing. It was my thing, but that's the way I had to look at it, you know. I had to. You have to look and say that I'm better than this guy, you know. He's not going to hit me, and if he hits me, he's lucky, and he won't do it again, you know.
Did you ever pitch a no-hitter?
I did not. My first year in the minor leagues in Orlando, Charlie Manuel was our right fielder. You know Charlie Manuel? He's a manager of the Phillies and played with Cleveland a long time. Charlie and our center fielder ran together on a pop-up, and it dropped in between them. That's the only hit I gave up. That's as close as I ever came to a no-hitter.
So you didn't buy him dinner that night, did you?
No. Well, I was making $500 a month before taxes, so I couldn't buy anybody anything.
But you talked about autograph. What was your feeling when some youngster or somebody come up to you and asked for the autograph?
I signed as many as I could. Yeah. And you know, most of the players do. Until it gets to be a real convenience, you know, when you're trying to get home with your family or you're out eating somewhere. But we didn't get recognized. You know, K-Line did, and Lolich and McLean, those guys, they got recognized around Detroit. But the rest of us, you had to be a hardcore fan to recognize us out on the street somewhere, you know. So we didn't get bothered. But I signed autographs as much as I could before the game started. But, you know, they put a rule in. They stopped us from signing autographs. And a lot of the fans thought we were being bad, but the rule was the umpires would sit there and they would fine you if you signed an autograph or gave a ball in the stands before the game. We'd sign autographs, and, you know, the bad thing is sometimes, you know, the bus is leaving and you're signing autographs, you say, I gotta go, and then the next 10 people think you're the world's biggest jerk because you didn't sign mine, you know. I've been waiting here. But sometimes you just can't, you just couldn't do it, you know.
We're talking about umpires. Was your pitch selection different and your pitching different with different umpires?
No. You know what?
I call it pretty much the same.
Yeah, you know what, I made a habit never to know any of the umpires. A lot of the guys knew them and talked to them and stuff. I couldn't tell you anybody that was behind the plate. And I think you're better off. I think I was better off that way. I didn't want to know. You know, there's only one guy I remember particularly stood out was Ron Luciano. You remember him? For an umpire, he was real outgoing. And I know one time I was pitching a game and it was a really tight game. And the count was like 2-2 on this hitter, and I threw a pitch that I thought was right on the corner, and he called it ball 3. And I went to home plate, and you know, usually the umpires will really argue with you. I went to home plate, and he says, Fred, it was really close. Could have gone either way. I'll try to do better next time. And I was ready to argue. And I said, okay, Ron, okay. He just completely shut me off, you know. Yeah.
I always said a left-hander never boxed. Did you ever box at the major league level?
You know, I don't remember, but I'm sure I did.
That's a left-hander, by the way, Russ Dietrich.
Good.
Never balked, never walked anybody, never did anything.
Yeah, I'm sure I did, but I don't remember any specific incident.
72, when the Tigers actually made the playoffs against the Oakland Athletics. Mm-hmm. Talk about that season. It's sort of forgotten because everybody who's a Tiger fan focuses it on 68, 84, but really 72, you were in the hunt.
Yeah, we were a pretty good team. I think we beat Boston out on the last game of the season. I remember we won. My dad came up to the game with a couple of his friends, which was kind of a big deal. They didn't get to do that much. And I was warming up in the bullpen when, I don't know who was pitching for us, got the last out against the Red Sox, and we clinched it, and that was fun. We went into the clubhouse, and you know, they have, Dave Dials used to be one of the local radio, television guys there. I don't know if you guys remember him. He became a national guy, but he was in there, and up on a little platform, they had a camera up there, and everybody had champagne and pizza, and he was pulling people up, and I think I was one of the first ones that got up there to say something on the camera, and that was pretty neat to do that.
So you pitched against the Athletics during the playoffs.
Yeah, I did. I was in the. You remember the big fight when Bert Campaneris threw his bat at Larry LeGros and Campy got suspended? I in some areas I got blamed for starting that, but what happened was Campy had stolen a couple bases off us earlier in the game, and Billy was pretty unhappy about it. And I didn't know any of this. None of us did. But anyway, I came in to pitch to Reggie Jackson. And I knocked Reggie down twice, you know, not on purpose. You know, he had a big hole in his zone right here. If you threw a good fastball, you know, he had a big, powerful swing. If you threw a good fastball in here, you're going to strike him out. If you get the ball out here, he's going to hit you hard, you know. And I'm trying to jam him in here, and pitch looked like it went through his neck to me, but it missed him, you know. So I thought, I'm not giving it. You know, we had a couple guys on base. Said, well, I got to come right back in there. You know, you can't give in to this guy. So I come right back in there, same thing, you know, right at him. He's down rolling in the dirt. And then, unfortunately, I got to throw him a strike. I throw a ball out over the plate. Well, he wasn't digging in. He was doing this, and he hit a ball in the opposite field, which for Reggie is really a big deal. He hit it in the gap and scored a run. And anyway, then I got the next couple guys out, and I came in, and Billy pinch hit for me. I knew Ernie, you know, he announced all our games. He was a great announcer. We didn't hear him that much because we were in the bullpen, you know. But he was a great announcer, a good guy to have around. Everybody liked him, you know. So I think one of the best announcers ever. You know, he could announce a game without being critical. He'd just tell you what's going on and make it interesting. So,
Fred, what did the designated hitter do to baseball?
I don't know. You know, I didn't like it because I like to bat. You know, and it takes. It depends on what you like. You know, I mean, obviously it adds a little bit more offense. You get a big hitter in there rather than a pitcher, but it takes a lot of the strategy out of the game.
Did you get some hits, Fred?
Yeah, I got a few. Yeah, I did.
Do you have any idea why pitchers are notoriously such terrible batters? Consistent. Why
Well,
causes that?
one of the things is, I mean, obviously they weren't signed for being a hitter, but most pitchers were the star of their team in high school and college, sometimes stuff. But hitting is such a the timing and everything is so critical, so difficult to do that if you don't get batting practice constantly and you're not always working on it, you're just not going to be able to, on a consistent basis, hit the ball hard. And that's a matter. I mean, we'd go sometimes 2 or 3 weeks as a pitcher without hitting, and then they'd send you up there and want you to put down a perfect bunt. It's like, well, I haven't seen a pitch in 3 weeks, you know. It's just a matter, you know, the pitchers are so good that send you up there without being really on top of your game. And but there were some notoriously really bad guys, you know. I mean, like Dean Chance. When he got a foul ball, he said he was coming out of his slump because he didn't even foul. Or Hank Gary. You remember Hank Gary? He was awful. But there's some guys, they just can't even put the bat on the ball. I know Catfish Hunter was a terrific hitter. And Ken Brett, who was George Brett's brother, he got me for a double one day in Pittsburgh, and he was a good hitter. So there are some that are dangerous. I know Jim Rooker told me, I was with Montreal, and we went into Pittsburgh to play, and Jim Rooker and I had played together, and he was with the Pirates, and we were on the field talking before the game, and they had a shortstop named Frankie Traveris, and he batted leadoff, and Ken Brett was pitching and batting ninth. And Rooker told me, he says, if it comes to Ken Brett, said walk Brett and pitch to Traveris because he's a better hitter than Traveris is. So
There's an article on the web concerning a guy named Tom Timmerman, who was in 1970 time period. He was with you. And they did talk about how he lost his closing job to you. At some point, how do you know that? Did at the time Mayo Smith come up and say, you're my closer, and Timmerman, or it just sort of happened?
It just happened. You know, back then, we weren't really called a closer. It was just, you know, whoever's pitching good, they bring you in, and we were the first guys. Timmerman and me, and then, you know, Sparky Lyle and with the Yankees, and Dave Justy, and some of these guys that were starting to get a lot of saves, and they started using them as just closers. And so we were kind of the early part of that. But when I first came, you know, it was just, well, who's pitching good tonight, who's throwing good, you know, and you came in. And when I started pitching more and more, that's all it was. They don't come and say, hey, you're the closer now, or you're doing it. No, they probably do today. But back then they didn't do that. It was just whatever. We led the league in complete games. Everywhere that Johnny Sane went as pitching coach, they led the league in complete games. He was with Minnesota, and then he came over with us, and you know, and getting a save today is like a piece of cake, because when we got a save, you had to earn the save. The pitcher didn't get knocked. The starter didn't come out until he got knocked out, and you were in trouble. And there was usually the winning or tying runs were on base. Now they just come in and pitch a ninth inning and get a save. You know, if they got a 2 or 3 run lead, and I don't remember that hardly ever happening.
Do you think McLean and Fidrich were overused and lost their arms? the overuse and pitch count now and the restricted innings?
Yeah, you know what? We had less sore arms then than they have now. Everybody gets overused, you know. We only had 4 starters. Everybody had 4 starters. They pitched every 4th day. We had Joe Coleman and Denny McClain and Mickey Lolich and Earl Wilson, and they never missed a start the whole year. And so, you know, and they had a whole bunch of complete games. But, you know, you pitched a game, then the next day you just stretched your arm out a little. The second day you threw a good, hard bullpen. The next day you just threw a little bit on the side. The next day you pitched. It was like that every 4th day. And, you know, it's more mechanics than it is pitching. The guys whose arms get worn out more are the relievers, I think. I know my arm, the last couple of years I pitched in the big leagues, it didn't have any pop in it anymore. You know, I mean, I was still trying to throw hard, but I just didn't have that little extra pop that you need, you know. And I pitched so much. One time we were playing Cleveland, a doubleheader, and the first game of the doubleheader, I warmed up 7 times and never got in the game. And I knew how to warm up. You know, I'd get up and I'd get loose, and then I'd watch and see who's coming up to bat and what the situation is. So, you know, I really knew how to do it, but still you got to throw a few pitches. And I got up the second time and third time. I got up 7 times and never got in the game. So the second game of the doubleheader, I got up 2 more times. Then I got in the game and pitched an inning. You know, I don't know if I threw 10 or 12 pitches or whatever. And so now I've got 9 warm-ups, and I pitched 1 inning. And the next day I come to the ballpark, and like always, Billy always say, "How you feel today, Fred?" And this was the only time I ever said, "I'm a little stiff." I couldn't raise my arm. I mean, he said, "A little stiff, you only pitched 1 inning." But see, they don't keep track of all that stuff. They might today, but.
What was your fastball clocked at generally?
We didn't clock them. No, we didn't have that stuff. It was, there were, you know, we had virtually no equipment. There was no weights. Nobody lifted weights. You weren't allowed to lift weights. That was especially pitchers. Today they got a weight room in Tigers. In the new Comerica Park, the weight room is bigger than our entire clubhouse was when I played. And they're doing it. But again, they tear muscles. They seem to get hurt more often, you know. So one time we were playing, I was with Montreal, and I wasn't throwing nearly as well as I once did, you know, and I was struggling to get by, and we were playing the Cubs, and they had a big outfielder named Andy Thornton, and he could hit the ball a mile. And he came up, and I just felt like I can't get a fastball by him. You know, I'm not throwing good enough. I can't do it. And so I'm going to throw him a big, slow curveball. And I gave it away. I mean, I got here and gave it away, and man, it was like, and he hit the ball. And you know, I followed through like this, and all you see is this white streak, and I'm waiting for the pain to hit me because it's coming right at my face. And I got my arm up to here, and when it hit my arm, it felt good because I thought it was going to hit me between the eyes. It went all the way to left field. My arm was purple and yellow from my wrist to my elbow, and yeah, but so I didn't throw too many slow pitches. I figured if they're going to beat me, they're going to have to beat me with the hardest thing I can throw. Mine was a sinker. You know, I was natural. I wiped across the ball like most left-handers do, and so it had a little tail to it. Guys who throw overhand like Jim Palmer and Denny McClain and stuff, they throw like this, and their ball tends to, it's a little bit of an optical illusion, but it tends to ride a little bit if it's high in the strike zone. So that's the difference. And usually they throw a little bit harder. If you throw, that's a 4-seam fastball that you would throw high that seems to have a little hop.
We're badly misunderstood because a whole lot of us fans just assume that a fastball is flat coming in. But there's not only speed, there's also movement on it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If it's straight, that's not good. I know I coached a year in Hiroshima in Japan, and they had this idea that your fastball has to be straight. If it moves, they want to straighten it out. And Warren Spahn and I were the coaches over there, and it drove us crazy. I mean, they say, we would try to say, no, it's got to move. No, that's not the way we do it. Just throw harder. And so we battled that, but that's the way they think. Yeah.
You just dropped a big name right there. Warren Spahn, he started in the New York Penn League.
He could hit a little too.
Yeah. So what was he like?
funny, gregarious, big, you know, outgoing, real loud. Opposite of Johnny Sane, very quiet. Johnny Sane is very quiet and to himself, and Spawny was just the opposite. So,
Spawn, Sane, and Rain.
yeah.
Well, you're originally from Buffalo, New York. He's one of the local here, Warren Spahn.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know
Grew up in Buffalo, and then ultimately Oklahoma. Is
Yeah.
what it was known as.
Yeah.
Eastern Bradford.
So I'm reading your baseball card here, Fred, and it says on the back, 1971, Fred was voted a King Tiger in 1971. What was that?
There's a popularity contest with the fan club. The fan clubs voted on it. And I had the biggest fan club, so they
Why was that?
voted me in. I don't know why. You know what? I was kind of the short reliever again, and so I was in the games when they were on the line a lot, and you get a lot of attention there, and so that kind of ups your popularity a little bit, you know. So I won that, and see, I won that in 71, 72, and then John Hiller won it the next year. So, and we were all short relief guys, you know. So kind of like we're the guy in the game at the exciting time.
Well, in 1961, you established a club record with 69 games in 71.
Yeah.
So at some point, your days with the Tigers end.
Kind of exciting to go to a new team because I'd been with the Tigers organization for 9 years. But on the other hand, I hated to leave. You know, I'd come up with all these guys were my buddies, and we were really close, and it was hard to leave them. But when I got to Houston, we really enjoyed it there, and we adopted both of our kids in Houston when in the year and a half we played there, a boy and a girl. So that worked out really good, and I got to play with the famous Doug Rader, and I still tell Doug Rader stories. He was one of my buddies, and he made going to the ballpark every day fun. Everybody did, but he was just a king.
Well, give us one or two.
Oh, I better not. When I went to the Astrodome, I'd always had problems with my back, and I wasn't in the Astrodome 2 weeks, and I was having severe back trouble from running on the. All they did was they had blacktop with AstroTurf on it. It was really hard, you know, and so I started having terrific back problems, and they, you know, when they trade for you, at least back then, you were going to play. It didn't matter what was a problem, you were going to play. And I said, I can't even tie my shoes. Well, you're going to play. Nothing wrong with you. So played the whole year, and then with a week to go, they said, well, we want you to go in and have a test done, you know, where they put the dye in your back and stuff. And so they did that, and it's, oh, just as we suspected, you've got 2 ruptured discs. I pitched 56 games that year. I was following through, catching myself, pitching and catching myself, my glove on my knee because I couldn't stop. And so naturally, I didn't have a very good year. And then your arm starts bothering you because you're trying to throw too hard. You're throwing a different position. That was kind of just the beginning of the end when that happened. Then I had back surgery, but once you have that back surgery, you know, they didn't want to fuse it because if you fuse it, then you're stiff, and then you're not going to be able to pitch, you know. And so anyway, you know, that's just kind of the beginning of the end. So I started the season with Houston the next year again, and I just threw mediocre, you know, nothing. And so then they traded me to Montreal, and I played the rest of that year and half of the following year in Montreal. But when you're limited like that and you're playing on a high level, you know, it's just a matter of you're trying to get by with your experience and everything, and I did it as long as I could. So we had Bob Bailey, you remember Bob Bailey, and Gary Carter was a rookie, and Larry Parrish was a rookie, and Pete McCannon was second baseman, Tim Foley was a shortstop, Barry Foote was the other catcher with Gary Carter. Pepe Manguel was our center fielder. So we didn't have a very good team. We had some young kids that should have still been in AAA, and Steve Rogers was our best pitcher. Steve Rogers was really a good pitcher, but he didn't get a lot of credit because he pitched for a bad team. You know, if he'd have been on a good team, he would have been known as one of the better pitchers in the league then. So,
Fred, question. They always quite often they say, well, he needs another year in AAA, rather than, do you get better coaching than you do when you go to the big time? Well, I mean, it just can't be another year.
Yeah, you get experience. That's all it is. You know, it's more experience. You try to hone your skills. You know, mostly, you know, you throw just as hard when you're in A ball as you do when you get to the big leagues. You don't pick up much speed. You know, you might pick up a mile an hour or two, but it's all about location and maybe making your breaking ball a little bit better. You know, and then location is the most important thing in pitching. Everybody thinks, well, it's how hard you throw, but it's not. It's where you put the ball. Location's the most important, movement's the second most important, and velocity's the third most important thing. And most people would look at it just the opposite. But I mean, I don't care how hard you throw. It's like when we played a big game, we would rather face Nolan Ryan than Bob Gibson or Tom Seaver or somebody, because they were going to nip the corners. And he might pitch a no-hitter, but he might walk 8 or 10 guys too, you know. So his location wasn't what those other guys were. So in a big game, that's why they, you know, those guys were big game pitchers, because they could come out there every day and locate the ball. And that's what you do in the minor leagues. You learn better. You learn pitch selection better. You know how to work pitchers, hitters differently.
So as you reflect back on this interesting and wonderful career, Fred, what are the couple of highlights? What are the moments that, if you had to sit in the car with Steve Garvey and tell him, what would you tell him?
Actually, I mean, the whole thing was just fantastic from beginning to end. Naturally, the '71 season was my best year in the big leagues. I had some great years that I really remember in the minor leagues, but mostly, I think, you know, the guys, the fellowship, the guys I met, the things that we did, and that was, to me, that was a highlight. That was the hardest part of leaving, because, you know, we didn't make any money back then, so I didn't have a lot to lose there. But going to the park and seeing my buddies every day, and the monkey business that went on, and the fun that we had, that, to me, that was the highlight. No matter how sick I was, I never missed a day in 13 years of professional ball. You know, some days you got the flu and you feel awful. Can't wait to go to the park. You know, it's just the way it was.
Did you collect anything along the way? Did you collect your baseball cards? Did you keep a uniform? Did you do any memorabilia keeping for yourself?
Not much. I have I have a Houston uniform, I think, and I think I have one of those old flannel uniforms that the Tigers used to wear in spring training. I think I got one of those, but they were tight-fisted. We couldn't get a new hat unless you turned in your old one, and they deemed. No, that's the honest to God's truth. You have to go turn in your old one, and they had to deem it to be bad. You know, this is not good. You can't wear this anymore. So we used to put them down, stomp a hole in them, and go try to get a new hat. You know.
What happened if you tossed the ball up to the fans?
What about that?
If you tossed the ball up to the fans?
Oh yeah, well, there was.
Charge you for that too?
Sometimes they did. Yeah. Today, you know, they urge you to do it, but they had rules back then. It was $50 or something at one point if you tossed the ball into the stands. So.
Wow.
Did you collect your baseball cards?
No, I didn't collect them. Over the years, I have quite a few. You just accumulate them, but I didn't collect them. The only thing I kept was, you know, when you finish a game and you win it or you save it, the catcher will toss the ball back to you, you know, and I took a lot of those home, especially in a '71, and I'd write on it, you know, pitch 2/3 of an inning to beat the Orioles or something like that, you know. And so I got a few of those, but that's about all. I don't have a lot of stuff.
What was that one out in that 1971 year where you said, I really wanted to get that son of a gun and I got him?
You know, I don't remember that in '71. The one out that I really remember sticks in my mind was the first time that I was pitching against Minnesota, and I was still a rookie, and I was trying to prove myself, and I threw a third strike fastball past Harmon Killebrew. He went down swinging, and when I saw the ball hit the glove, you know, it's kind of like a little puff hits. When I saw the ball hit the glove and strike him out, I knew I belonged. You know, that was the one pitch I remember that, well, I belong in the big leagues. I can do this, you know, so that's one.
Did you shake the catcher off very often?
Yeah, all the time. I called all my pitches.
All your pitches?
Yeah, I did. And at first, my buddies would say, "You can't do that. That's Freehan. He's an all-star catcher." I said, "Yeah, but if I get a loss, it goes on my record, not Freehan's, you know." So I'm taking responsibility for what I throw here, and I called every one of them.
Did the dugout call many pitchers?
No.
Many pitches?
No, only knockdowns. If Billy wanted somebody knocked down, he would give you one of those. Flip you.
When a guy come out to hit you, he said, "Well, go hit Billy. He's the guy that's
That's an interesting. Would Billy direct it to the pitcher or the catcher?
The catcher, because you know what? Honest to gosh, those years I was pitching, I had tunnel vision. The only people that I ever saw was the catcher and the hitter. You know, it was like that. So they couldn't yell at me. He would yell at Freehan. You know, and then Freehan, the signal was that. That means flip him. You know, just knock him down. You don't hit him. You just knock him down to let him know that you're thinking about him. So.
Did you ever hit anybody?
Oh yeah.
I mean, intentionally?
Only once in my life, and that was my first year in the minor leagues. And I hit Don Pepper, and his daughter is Dottie Pepper, the golf announcer. I don't know if you know Dottie Pepper or not. She was just a little girl then. And I was playing for Minnesota, Orlando, and we were playing the Lakeland Tigers. And the first time up, he was their cleanup batter, big left-hander, and I got a ball out over the plate. It's my fault, but I got a ball out over the plate, and he hit a bullet, hit me right in the chest. I couldn't even move. It pow pow, you know. I was staggering around the mound, you know, and so he came up 2 innings later, and the first pitch, he gets up there, and I hit him right there. You know, it was just like. And I was only 19 years old. It was just, but I had to, in my mind, I had to set the field that, hey, you know, I'm not gonna.
Serve notice.
Yeah.
But being left-handed, what was your pickoff move like?
Lousy. It was lousy. I avoided throwing to first base. And you know what's funny about that is Lou Brock told a friend of mine that I was really hard to steal off of because he never got to see my move. The reason he did it, I didn't want him to see it because once he saw it, so I would just look over 2 or 3 times. I'd change my timing and stuff and then pitch, you know. But I didn't throw over to first much.
Fred,
Yeah.
I was looking, your hands, your fingers seem to have really long.
Yeah, I have big hands. That's
Yeah,
everybody
you do.
always asks me about it.
Did that help you gripping the ball?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I think big, strong hands. You know, the last thing that touches a pitch is your fingertips when you let go. And if you got big, strong fingers where you can get out there and push off with it, you know, that's what you want. And I'm sure it helped. Normally, most pitchers with small hands don't last very long. It's just in my experience. I've seen that with a few other guys. If they have small hands, they just don't seem to last very long. And so, it must have helped me. I don't know.
Well, shake his hand and you'll know it's for real. This has been terrific, Fred. And I got just one final question is, what do you think about Steve Garvey?
Oh, he's a great guy. Yeah, I love Steve Garvey.
Thank you.
How did you connect? I guess the other question, you're here because you're working at Cummins. How did you connect with Cummins?
How did I get connected with Cummins? Well, because they have a laboratory over there, and I work for the company. I used to work for the company that built those, and my job was to test them and certify them and get them signed off. And that's been almost 35 years I've been doing that now.
Fred, one more question.
Yes, sir.
What do you feel about the automatic walk?
I don't like that. I mean, I don't know.
Ruining the game with all this stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. And I know they're trying to speed the game up, and I don't know why the games are so long, you know.
Designated hitters, the same thing.
Yeah.
Too many commercials.
Yeah, I'm one of the old-fashioned guys. I like it used to be, but times change, right?
Get the money to pay the big salary.
Well,
Hey, Fred, what I want you to, what we have today for you guys is Russ Dietrich pulled together his baseball card collection, left-handed pitchers, and a lot of Fred Scherman baseball cards. So we've got this for everybody, and maybe you could sign these for the guys, and to make sure you get one as yourself. But I want to thank Russ, and this will be part of it. I want to thank Fred Scherman. That's fantastic.